Dear God, today as the session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. Please honor our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Council Mercia.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Council Nuwan.
Here.
Council Elliott.
Here.
Council Kennedy.
Here.
Council Leahy. Council Laurie.
Here.
Council Martin.
Here.
Council Mendonça.
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. I recognize at this time Councilor New.
Thank you, Mayor. It is with great sadness that I announce the death of a Cambodian American, the King, Father Norodom Sihanouk, who passed away on Monday, October 15, 2012, at the age of 89. He was an eccentric man of many interests. He was a beloved figure in Cambodia. King Sihanouk saw Cambodia go from French rule to independence, from the brutal Khmer Rouge period and the guerrilla war that followed its toppling. He then ushered his country into the thriving constitutional monarchy it is today. Cambodia, as a nation, lost a great king. My condolences and the condolences of Cambodian American in the city of Lowell and across the state to the Queen Mothers and our current king. May he rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd please rise in a moment of silence and darken chambers. Thank you. At this point, we have under City Clerk's portion of the agenda, minutes of the City Council meeting October 9th for acceptance. Motion to approve by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have City Manager's portion of the agenda. Communications from City Manager, responses to City Council motions and requests. Any discussion? Councilor Mercia?
Well, Mr. Mayor, there's nothing on the agenda, but there is something in our packet that we can speak about, and I don't know if anybody wants to speak about it, but it's the Amoresco contract that we received, and I did have some questions. I did go over it with the city manager, and he did explain it to me, but I want the public to know. It's not so much that I should be aware of the answers. I think the public has a right to know where we're going with this contract. We all know that there was much controversy in delivering it, so I just wanted to set the record straight. And I have a number of questions. I feel that I was adequately supplied the answers, but I want to ask them again, and we'll go over this again. And I wanted to know through you, Mr. Mayor, to the city manager, how much to date has been spent on this contract. I know it's a 20-year contract signed in 2008 for $21.1 million. So I wanted to know the estimated savings each year this contract provides. There was some confusion as to saving between 1.5 and 2.5 million over the life of the contract, but that isn't actually the case. It's like we'll be saving 1.5 million on the landfill solar panels. So let's start at the very beginning and say that what would you estimate the cost of the life of the what is the the life of the contract, how much would we be saving each year? We got an estimate of 20 years, but let's start with that.
Well, Council, there's, let me try to back up a little bit, and as you and I appreciate
Sure.
the opportunity for you and I to speak yesterday. There are essentially two aspects to the Amoresco contract that we're talking about. One is the energy improvements that have been made in a multitude of buildings, and I'm going to have Mr. Marchand hand out a package that lists all of the improvements that we've made in the various buildings across the city. Now, it's not a highly sophisticated list or detailed list. It just lists specific items at each facility. But to give you an example, in this facility, we've installed central air conditioning. We've replaced the boiler. We have put energy-efficient lighting in. We've put controls on the radiators. Over at the JFK building, we've put in new windows, a new roof, new air handling system. We've added air handling systems here. We've put roofs on at the Riley School. We put new windows in, and we put a new roof on, and we put a new heating system in, and it goes across the board. So that's what the $21 million went towards, those types of improvements. It's going to save us about $1.5 million a year. There's a guarantee from Amoresco, as our energy service contractor, that we will save the amount equivalent to pay for the debt service associated with this project, or they will make up the difference.
Excuse me, Mr. Manager, what is the yearly debt service on the interest? What is the cost?
That's going to vary somewhat. Right now, it's $1,079,000 is the debt service associated with the Amoresco contract. That will go up some because not all the money has been borrowed permanently yet. Once all of that is fully loaded, of the $21 million, almost all of it is gone. I don't have an exact number for you, but we still have some punch list items that we're doing in some of these buildings. And we still have there's a portion of the $21 million that's going to go to the window project that the council added money to this past budget season.
Did we have a new roof at the auditorium?
Not through the Amoresco project.
There's no solar panels on the roof?
Solar panels on the roof there. That's the second phase. That's the second part of the Amoresco contract, though, that I want to speak to. But the $21 million did the energy improvements, and the debt service for those improvements, long overdue improvements, will be paid for by the energy savings. And this chart that I gave you, shows the purple here shows the debt service, and the blue shows the energy savings each year. So it's a cumulative. So the first year, really we paid about $300,000 in debt service. We saved about $1 million in energy. In fiscal year 12, again, this is cumulative, we were up somewhere in the vicinity of $1.4 million in debt service, but we saved about $2.1 million total energy. In fiscal year 13, and again, this is just budgeted, we're at about $2.5 million in debt service total. That's in the 1.79 this year plus what we've paid other years. And we've saved about $3.7 million in energy costs over that period of time. So if you spread this out over the 20 years, we will make up in energy savings an amount equivalent to the debt service or more. And we'll have improved buildings as a result of that. The second part of the Amoresco contract that has, this was approved several years back. The other part of the Amoresco contract was the renewable energy portion, the solar portion. We did solar projects on essentially 3 types of locations. The one that's gotten some attention of late is the landfill, because that's the largest. But we also did it on several school buildings and on the auditorium. And we did not pay anything for those installations. Zero cost to the city for those installations. The provider, Amoresco, entered into an agreement with the city, a power purchase agreement, where they would front the money to do the construction. They would get the tax credits to help offset the cost. They would provide us with lower energy costs. In the case of the school, the lower energy costs go directly to those school accounts. In the case of the auditorium, the lower energy costs are paid, but what we really benefit from is what's known as net metering credits. If we aren't putting the energy actually into that building, the state has authorized a certain amount of credits to be paid by the utilities to the provider or the creator of the renewable energy. So in that case, since we don't pay the electric bill at the auditorium, we wanted the electricity that came from that to come to the city. Let the contractor, the vendor of the management company down there, pay their own electric bill, but the electricity generated from the auditorium offsets the electricity here at City Hall. Then the landfill, again, because there's nothing there to provide electricity to, all of the net metering credits there come to the, did we hand out this one? Yeah. Come to the city for offsetting our electricity costs here. The total amount, when you add all this up, and I've given you a spreadsheet here with a couple of, well, several things. I've given you a summary spreadsheet that shows, depending upon what happens with energy costs, over the 20 years, those three components, the landfill, the schools, and the auditorium, will save the city anywhere from $1.8 million to $3 million. The variation there is the 3.5% increase in energy costs that provides us with the biggest amount of savings is based on a 20-year average of electric cost increases as provided by the federal government. The 2% is what is currently being projected as energy costs going up. But it's, as we all know, projections are just that, projections. So going with either the federal projection or the federal historical, it's between that 1.8 and 3 million. But the bottom line is, we didn't pay anything for that installation. We just reaped the benefits of the savings. I hope that. It's all detailed. What I've provided you with this second packet is, and I apologize, this came to me as we were kind of getting ready for tonight's meeting. In addition to the documents you've already been provided, some of the questions that council has had have prompted me to put more information together. The map at the front, the pink, shows where the solar panels are going on the landfill. For those that were in attendance, the large pink square off to the left is where the groundbreaking was, the day we went up to the groundbreaking. It's right by the entrance off of Drum Hill. And the other areas are the flat areas on the landfill. We can't really put them on the slopes because of the cap that we have there. Then is following the summary sheet there that gives you the total amounts. We have it by category, by landfill, by schools, and by auditorium as to the specifics of how much we expect to save each year for the full 20 years. And I think that answers all that I can think of right now.
I know that Councilor Kennedy asked for the contracts. That's why I thought it was kind of strange that we didn't get them, because he asked for the contracts, not the attachments or the addendums or anything else. So, but be that as it may, I just want to go into this one paragraph that I see here. Mm-hmm. And it says that the City of Lowell intends to enter into a separate and distinct energy management service contract with Amoresco to implement other energy conservation measures, and each contract will contain a written guarantee of energy savings. This was dated in October of 2009. Would this have been an attachment or an addendum to the contract, or is this part of the original contract, this statement here?
I'm off, you're reading from a very large amount of
I
paper
know,
that we have here.
it's not like I finished it either, but.
Yeah, the reason, and I spoke with Councilor Kennedy about this earlier today, and as I explained, and I think it was brought forward, one, I wanted to be here for this discussion about the Amoresco contract, and we also wanted to pull everything together. And the contract, just to get the power purchase agreement for the landfill, which was what the initial request was, really doesn't tell the whole story. To get the whole story, that became possible only through the total contract with Amoresco for energy services, energy service contract, ESCO. You really don't get the full picture from that until you look at the whole request for qualifications and what was asked of them, what was provided, what was the basis of their calculations or their proposal, and then the power purchase agreements for the schools and auditorium and for the landfill. So we wanted to pull it all together for the council in its entirety.
I'm just asking these questions because I think it's that important, as my colleagues do as well, that I want the public to know that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. I want you to know that if we initiate these cost energy savings, you have to spend money to remodel something to make it more efficient. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like let's say that I had a refrigerator for 25 years and it's drawing so much. I have to spend money to replace that to get an energy savings that I could get profit for, save energy in the long run. And this is what I think we're doing on a larger scale. So I don't want the public to think there's something wrong here, that we have a contract and we're paying out, but we're not getting things for this. I mean, I appreciate the fact that I come here in the summer and I'm not sweating to death. I mean, I don't mind the heat,
Right.
but I certainly don't like the cold. And when we come in here in the winter and it's freezing and we have counselors that have to bring blankets and this is not the way it should be. And so I appreciate the fact that we're trying to energy save. We're spending some money, but I think in the long run, it's going to pay off. And so this is my opinion. Maybe it isn't everybody's opinion, but, and I'm trying to understand that and let the public know that as well. So
Well,
that's why I'm asking these questions.
No, and I think these are good questions, and we've tried to communicate this, and you can't communicate it enough. This is really a good news story for the city. We actually received a nice editorial from the Lowell Sun a couple months ago, basically commending us for this the Amoresco deal. We received an award from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for our Amoresco project.
Yep.
We're going to be receiving an award on October 30th in Atlanta by a national organization for this project. Unfortunately, it's a council night, and I would never want to miss a council night, so I will not be going, although they offered. But instead, they're going to have...
We could have a designee on the
Well,
council.
we can still arrange that if you want, but someone is going to come and bring the award to the council
good.
instead. Someone else that didn't get to go to Atlanta. But this has saved us money. I think your explanation of the refrigerator is a great example of, we have to invest. People put additional insulation in their houses. It costs them money, but it saves them on heating bills.
And that's what it's
right.
all about, I
Right,
feel.
and in our case, not only that, in our case, it wasn't just a matter of doing things to help us save energy, but you hit the nail right on the head. We had a heating system here that 2 years ago, between Christmas and New Year's, we were without heat in this building because the heating system was so broken down that we had employees that we had to send home in some cases, but many of them stayed in 40-degree temperature. We had, we've had roofs with leaks that we had never spent the money on under the Amoresco project, we were able to replace those roofs, like the Riley School, the roofs, the windows, hot water for the kitchen there, all because of this project. So it's doing things that needed to be done, but as you pointed out very well, it's doing the things too that are going to save us money.
Well, we have buildings that are rather old. The auditorium itself,
Right.
very beautiful buildings, this city hall, and we have to maintain that which we own. And sometimes it's a little costly, but the point that I was trying to make is, what is the debt service? Is it holding us back from making a profit? But evidently, it's not, so that's a good thing. Thank you. No
Thank you,
further
Counselor.
question.
Councilor Kennedy and Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager. Mr. Manager, it was good to get the report Friday, but the report, and we spoke about this earlier, is 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks coming. And I think that that's a long time, and that we should have had the report last week. And I understand that you may have wanted to be here when we discussed the report, but actually, if the report had been delivered to the city councilors in a timely manner, it would have given the councilors more time to go over the report. And we probably could have put the discussion off last week until you were here. I'm sure that there were several discussions last week that were put off because you weren't here. I don't have to say anything more to that, right?
I understand. Thank you, Counselor.
The reason that I asked for the contract, and what I was interested in, was just the solar contract. And there are 4 members of the city council here that weren't here when the contract was signed, and it's a 20-year contract. And so I think that everybody that sits on the city council had a responsibility to at least, take a look at the contract and know what's in there. In going through it, I realized, and I didn't realize this last week, nor did I realize it 2 weeks ago, that the solar panel contract, or a portion of the contract out at the landfill, is really just a rider to the existing contract with Amoresco, right?
Well, I don't know if I necessarily call it a rider. It's an additional agreement.
Right.
What the initial agreement was to do energy services, but as they went through that, there are the power purchase agreements for the schools and the landfill, schools and the auditorium, and there's the separate power purchase agreement for the landfill.
Okay. And part of the reason why the city, why the administration went that way is because it would expedite the matter, I assume, right? Rather than to go out for an individual bid just on those solar panels.
It would expedite it, and we also believed it was the more prudent measure. The competition right now for these solar projects, and Council, you and I spoke about some knowledge you had regarding some places out west that were doing some large-scale projects. There's been new regulations, for instance, that have come out only within the last month. I spoke with someone else today about this, another attorney that does quite a bit of work in this. The Department of Energy now is limiting the large-scale projects. You can't do more than 2 megawatt projects anymore. So those large farms that you mentioned out west, those deals aren't going anywhere anymore. Now maybe some have already signed on, but those are disappearing. Likewise, the net metering credits that Councilor Mercer and I were just talking about with regards to the landfill and the auditorium, the net metering credits are limited. They're 3% of the power generated in either public or private sector. And they had been 1%, they got moved up to 2%, and then they've now been put up to 3%. All of the private cap of peak day kilowatt power, the private cap has been reached. So no more private solar farms are really being built because they can't get that net metering credit. On the public side, 2/3 of them, that cap has been used up. So now the privates, as you and I discussed, the private parties that are out there that have already put these projects far enough down the road that can't get the net metering credits are trying to sell those. And they're not there's somewhat of a market there. We're trying to grab those net metering credits as quickly as possible. We expect by the spring they'll be gone. And so we wanted to be able to grab those because that's really where we get the savings, given the complexity of that site at the landfill. We had the methane gas issue out there, we have the cap issue, we have the slope issue. So we wanted to expedite it for those purposes and tie in the highest bang for our buck that we could get for this project.
Okay. The, out west is just Western Mass. It's not,
After Worcester,
Vermont or
it's out
anyplace.
west.
It's just, and these are family farms
Right.
that have been dormant. And so these contracts are not on a megawatt basis. They're on a per acre basis.
Right.
And that's how those leases go. And some of them are fresh. So I think that there's still an interest for solar energy in the, in that market. So my primary interest was to compare what they're getting per acre to what we got. And I realized that the horse is out of the barn and this is already done and so forth. But I still thought that it was good to take a look at how the city was doing in relation to how they were doing in Western Mass. And I thought, because nobody had explained it to me, that a majority, at least, of the landfill was being used. But if you look at this, it's really only a small area. So, given what we should receive for a year, probably we did pretty well. Maybe we did better than the farmers out in Western Mass. But what would be helpful to me, and the information that I don't have and that I couldn't find in the contract, is how many acres do we have, how many acres are involved with solar panels? When we spoke earlier today, I think that you mentioned that you thought that there were 30 acres.
About 42.
42 acres at the landfill. But this is a small amount. I would say so it would be, I would like to know how many acres are going to have the solar panels on them. And the reason that I would like to know that is just so that I can make the comparison. But I do understand that whether it's a good deal or it's not a good deal, it's something that we're locked into for 20 years. I just think that when you have a 20-year contract, that everybody has a responsibility to at least look at that. And so that's the reason for that. And that's actually the reason why I asked for the other contract, is just to see why we needed a contract for that, but we'll save that discussion for a different time. The savings for the solar panel, if I heard Councilor Mercier correct, was 1.5 million for the solar panels at the landfill?
The solar panels at the landfill are between $1.5 to $2.5 million, depending, it really will depend upon what happens with the price of electricity that National Grid charges, because our benefit comes off the net metering credit that we receive. The faster those go up, the more those go up, the more of the net metering credit we receive.
Okay.
We're in a fixed cost for electricity from Amoresco,
Okay,
and they're responsible for all maintenance and operations.
okay. In our discussion earlier today, you mentioned $84,000.
That's,
What's that for?
if you look at the one with the map on it, if you look at the second, the third page in.
Yeah, second page, I think.
No, go to the third page, where it says
Okay.
the larger spreadsheet that says landfill.
Yeah,
If you look down under year one,
okay,
you see under case one and case two, they both have the same, because the net metering credit is known at this time as the 0.143. If you drop down two more lines to annual electricity savings, you see a number of $83,985.
okay,
It's just under $84,000.
okay. And that's the same as what's on page 2, just for 1 year on page 2.
Right.
Okay, and so that is what the city should realize in savings, or
At our
That's the-
credit on our electric bills,
that's the
yes.
financial impact that the solar panels at the landfill will have alone?
That's correct.
not counting the auditorium or anything else.
Now, if you look on the following pages, you'll see
Yep.
that what those were received. The annual electricity savings for the schools, the first year will be $13,000, just under $14,000. And on the, we're already receiving on the auditorium, net metering credits there of just about $4,500 per year.
Okay, then the only piece of information that I would request is to know how many acres of the landfill have solar panels on them.
We can get that for you, Council, and you can try to do that analysis. I would only caution you that that might not be, you have to look at not just the price of the cost of the per acreage, but you also have to look at the construction costs, particularly in this case, we had the methane, we had the cap, we had the other construction limitations there. But we'll get that for you, and we can see
Okay.
if we can work with you on that.
The methane, Amoresco bought out the methane contract.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
And so the city was going to realize 3 more years on that contract?
We're still getting, we really don't get much in the way of revenue from that anymore. That was a 15-year, I believe it was a 15-year deal that was signed back in 2000. There's 3 years left on that. There's still methane being produced. What was bought out essentially by Amoresco was the exclusivity that was held by the methane company for the site. They're still generating whatever methane they can out of that, but there isn't much left.
Okay, and so should the revenue that would have been realized by the city through the methane contract for those 3 years, should that be factored into what's being saved by the solar panels at the landfill?
We're still receiving any methane. They're still generating whatever methane they can. That isn't affected by the solar at all. What was bought out was the exclusivity that they had for the site.
Okay, so they just bought that piece. They didn't buy the contract out then?
No.
What they did, okay.
Right.
I evidently misunderstood you earlier today then.
Okay. And the other part of that, and that was but that whole methane issue was one that was, we couldn't really, in terms of procurement, that was an issue that we had. We would have had, in order to provide this around, we would have had to have cleared that matter up, and that would have been a delay, and it would have been a prohibition on.
All right, so just to summarize then, what we're getting out at the landfill is revenue from methane for 3 more years.
Right.
Plus the savings or revenue from the landfill.
Correct.
From the solar panels.
And as I indicated to you earlier today, we're looking to see what other revenues we can get from that.
Right.
Including the crazy idea of maybe leasing it out for grazing purposes.
Yes.
Which has been something some other communities have looked at.
Right.
I told you I'd wait on that crazy idea, but I figured I would jump
You might
out
as
and
well
throw it out now.
tonight. Yeah, okay. All right, so if I can get that information, it shouldn't take
get
2
that.
weeks, right?
We will get that to you as soon as we can.
Okay,
It shouldn't
thank you.
take 2 weeks.
Council Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the manager. That's the first I've heard of the grazing. I've heard a ski slope and tobogganing, but the grazing's the first. Just following up on some of the questions from Councilor Mercy and Councilor Kennedy, a couple of months ago, I put on a motion about extracting energy from the water to wastewater, either the water itself or the byproduct. This wouldn't prohibit any, I couldn't find it in here, but that wouldn't prohibit us from negotiating with another company.
No, oh, no.
If we chose to go in those directions, okay.
Not at that plant, no. Nope.
Okay, that was the question I had. One thing we did receive in the packet this week was the sign exchange for reserved dwelling parking space, and I got to commend the head of the DPD, Adam Bakey, for really coming up with this idea. I sit on the subcommittee, and it wasn't discussed with us, so he's come up with a great idea. Starting Monday, October 15th to December 13th, there's going to be a sign exchange for the parking signs that people have outside their homes. And it's going to be a $10 fee, but if you exchange your signs over the next 2 months, up until December 13th, that will be waived, that $10 will be waived. And starting December 14th, the new ordinance goes into effect. So if you have an old sign as of December 14th, they're useless, absolutely useless. So it would be best if you come down, I guess, to John Street, the Joseph Downs Garage, turn in your sign from Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and between the 15th and December 13th, it's for free, the $10 are waived. I just wanted to bring it up, thank you.
Thank you. And I know that there'd been a number of people down at the John Street Garage already, so.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the communications? Councilor Noon.
Just a quick question on that dual parking sign. How do we enforce it? Suppose somebody didn't come to change it or get a new sign. How do we enforce it if they still have the old sign after December 14?
Well, Mr. Baking, do you want to?
Good evening, councilors. The current system is sort of a self-policing effort in that if somebody identifies a problem where there's somebody parking who's not eligible, not a resident of the dwelling, they would call the police department, or sometimes they call the inspectors, but it's the police department that can actually enforce that in the current system. That process would not be significantly different going forward, but if the sign that people are trying to enforce going forward is one of the old signs that are no longer valid, then they will be given information about how to get a new sign that is valid at that time, and they'll be able to bring that forward or make the exchange. After December 14th, as the council pointed out this evening, there will be a charge associated with that, the $10 annual fee. But if you do bring your old sign in and exchange it before December 13th, there is no fee. We'll also take that old sign off your hands in the process and get you a new one that'll be valid. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the communications? Councilor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions still on the solar panels at the landfill. And I do want to make the distinction. I'm not talking about the Amoresco with the $21 million loan order. That was not the intent of the original motion to get these contracts. My concern was, and it continues to be even after receiving all this information, Mr. Manager, is I do not understand why this project was not put out to bid. And I listened to your explanation, and I don't believe you had the authority to do that. But first, let me just ask a few questions. The landfill was not identified as a solar site during the technical audit. So when you say that, this is kind of covered under, the ESCO contract, I don't believe it is. The amendment that was issued in November 15th, 2010 to the purchase power agreement, the original purchase power agreement was for the municipal buildings. And as I read this, there's a section, number 1, amendment, customer and provider have agreed to modified pricing provisions, which I see there is a differential in the schools. They get a very good rate. But secondly, what was troubling is that Exhibit C, which had the list of those buildings, school and municipal buildings, again, did not include the landfill. So this amendment amended that exhibit to include a new exhibit that did include the landfill. And I don't see how you can go out to bid with the original solicitation, list the buildings that are to be bid on, and then issue an addendum later for a huge project without it being included in there. That is, it's like, bidding 101, procurement 101. And so I did ask the question, did you get authority from, or approval from DOER? And there is a letter dated October 9th, and they address the original agreement for the municipal buildings. Nowhere in here do they reference, or actually in their email, and I find it hard to believe, Mr. Manager, we sent a a three-page letter, and we only get a one paragraph on on a huge project, we get a one-paragraph response. There's no other formal response to this letter? This is it, an email?
That's correct.
Well, I would think that we would get something a little bit more with a signed signature on it, but that's just me. But this was dated 2009. This was approval for this PPA. It was not for the solar farm. So there was no authority to enter into that agreement. If it was identified in the initial technical audit and included in the request for qualifications, I can understand how you're trying to bridge that gap. It still should have been bid, in my opinion, anyway. But the timing of this, there's no approval from DOER for that solar. Yes, is it a good thing? Of course it's a good thing. Do we get a good deal? I don't know if we get a good deal. As I mentioned, the only time you get a good deal is when you put together a bid, you go out on the open market, and you get competitive pricing. Asking one company to come in and say, well, you know, this is what we're going to offer you, and it is going to be savings, that's not a good way to do business. That's not how you're going to get the best price, Mr. Manager. So I want to know, you know, why you committed the city to 20 years without putting this out to bid. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no DOER approval, which is very clear in Chapter 25A to go ahead and do this. I mean, it's clear in this amendment. You're deleting Exhibit C, which listed all of the other projects to be done in the original solicitation, inserted another one, and then, you know, all of a sudden the landfill appears.
Well, the Amoresco contract is not limited to, it's really any under the statute. It's providing energy services for us, for our buildings and for renewable energy in general. We believe it does meet the criteria. We've been in communication with the state regarding all of our projects, DOER, and so we feel that we have done the right thing. As I just explained to Councilor Kennedy, the issue with you know, the bidding, we feel that it was in accordance with statute. And beyond that, we felt the time was of the essence, and we've got the best possible price for the city, because had we been required to deal with the methane issue ourselves, had we had to deal with the cap issue ourselves, there would have been cost to the city, and in fact, the cost to the city and the time taken to do that would have resulted in the project probably never moving forward, given the eating up of the credits, the net metering credits and the SREC credits that are out there.
You know, Mr. Manager, I filed motions on a regular basis on this to get updates on exactly what's going on. You actually included some of the responses back. Nowhere did you include in any of those responses any of this information until after the fact. I mean, you know, you're signing a 20-year agreement. You don't think it's important enough to tell the city council that an addendum was issued for the solar project? No, I don't think that's being straightforward, and that's why there are questions. And secondly, again, I'm going back to what the law says. And you can't circumvent the law because we have a methane issue. You can't circumvent the law because renewable energy credits are expiring. And I mean, really, we've been on this since 2008, and I don't know why all of a sudden, seems like last minute. I mean, there was just an agreement signed in July of this year with Amoresco. So something doesn't bode well. Something's not sitting right here with me, and it's based upon what has taken place and what the law is.
Mr. Manager?
If I may, Counselor, and I appreciate the fact that we may disagree, but I will take exception. I will take exception to this, the image that you're trying to portray right now, that somehow the council was left out of the loop. I can, if you'd like, I could sit here tonight and read through the various memorandums that have gone to the city council, going all the way back to May 8th of 2009, and I'll just start with that one. The city's performance contract, Amoresco, is evaluating the feasibility of installing wind and other alternative energy sources in the city. Lowell is not considered to be situated in a good wind corridor. However, we will get a better sense of the feasibility of wind once Amoresco completes its investigation. Their initial investigation has centered on the landfill for both wind and solar. However, they will broaden their reach to other locations where wind may be feasible. They are more optimistic about solar power, and early analysis indicates that solar is very viable in multiple locations in the city. And by the way, this was a response to you from a motion that you filed on 5/6 of 2008 that we wanted to follow back up on.
Mr. Manager, read me the
I
part
can
in
go-
there that says that you're going out to bid for a
Counselor.
20-year project for a multi-million-dollar investment
Counselor,
on
the manager
a
has the floor.
on the city land, on
Counselor, the
city property.
The manager has the
Read that,
floor.
please. Read that to
We
me.
did not specify that, perhaps, Counselor, but we, on numerous occasions.
Read me where
Excuse me,
Department of
Counselor,
Energy
if
Resources.
if I could complete my sentence.
Counselor, the manager has the floor. We've gone over this before. You'll be recognized first, and then you can speak. The counselor.
We've
the
gone over
manager
this
has-
before. Just make sure the playing field is level, so don't let him interrupt me. Got it?
He didn't interrupt you. He was recognized by the chair. He has the floor
Robert's
right
rules
now.
prohibits people from reading speeches too, Mr. Mayor, right?
Well, I
Go
will
ahead,
say-
Mr. Manager.
No,
Go ahead.
Counselor, I will not read any speeches. But what I will tell you is there's numerous memorandum in here that were given to the council as recently as this summer, indicating that Amoresco was doing the project at the landfill, and not once did you or any other councilor say, how's this being done? What's the issue here? In fact, we received accolades that we were actually moving forward with the solar landfill, the solar project at the landfill. Now, this image that you want to portray that the administration is not communicating with the council is false and misleading, and it's, in my opinion, totally inappropriate.
Okay, so I'll take your words. We'll agree to
Counselor
disagree.
Elliott,
We'll agree to
You
disagree.
will be recognized
Okay,
by
Mr.
the chair first. Any further discussion on the communications?
This is called a dialogue, Mr. Mayor, and if you don't want to have a dialogue about this, that's fine. I have some other
I'm
questions.
not suggesting
and
that.
other
I'm
statements.
suggesting that you will be recognized by the chair prior to speaking. Are there any further discussions on the communications?
Yes, I have other.
Counselor
Mr. Mayor,
Elliott.
Okay. So we'll agree to disagree, Mr. Manager, okay? Because whatever impression you think I'm trying to leave, that's the impression that I have. And that's the impression that the people have. When you go out, and we have to, ask week after week for this information instead of providing it to us. Nowhere is that saying that you went out to hire Amoresco, sign a 20-year agreement. Who knows? We still don't even know what renewable energy credits that Amoresco is getting, what type of sweetheart deal they're getting, because they're not just coming in here and saying, hey, we're just going to build a solar farm and give the city, a certain rate. They're in this to make money. They're a profit company. I want to know how the city is benefiting, and the only way to do that is get all the information. You had no authority to sign this under 25A. This should have went out to bid, or you needed approval from DOER for this addendum and this amendment. And I suggest that you or I will contact DOER to see if we did this right, because as far as I'm concerned, we didn't. And by not going out to bid, you don't get the best deal for the city. You know it, and I know it.
Any further discussion on the communications? Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, let me just try to put things in perspective a little bit. This contract was signed when there was a previous council here. So there's people that sit on this council now that weren't involved. And I know that there's been times, a couple of times, probably since I've been here, when the contract's been mentioned. But in all of those occasions, I've always assumed that the whole thing was just all in one, just one contract, and that was it. The solar panel portion of the contract, whether you call it a rider or you call it, I don't know the term that you used, an extension of the existing contract, or what was the term that you used, Mr. Manager?
Call the term I use, Counselor, but the ESCO contract provided that Amoresco would provide energy services to the city,
Yes.
including the energy improvements that we've discussed, as well as renewable energy, as I read from the memo, across the city.
Yes.
And in order to implement the renewable energy provisions, the only way to do that, the one that makes the most sense, is through the power purchase agreement.
Yes. And when you read through the contract, there is a part of the contract that says that the city manager is authorized to negotiate and enter into any agreement that he thinks is in the best interest of the city. And I'm not suggesting that you didn't do that. You know, I think that I can understand that. And I can also understand going with Amoresco on the solar panels just because there wasn't that much time, and maybe not time to do anything else or to negotiate with a lot of other companies. And I'm not saying that it's not a bad thing for the city. Hopefully, it's a good contract. However, I do think that your administration could do a better job with negotiating. I think when the contract was signed, I don't know if everybody got a copy of the contract then, but I asked for a copy of the contract 2 weeks ago, and it took 2 weeks to get a copy of the contract. Now, maybe everybody had one, but if everybody had one, then that would mean that you really only needed to provide 4. And it took 2 weeks, which is a long time. I think what Councilor Elliott is saying is that this contract, maybe the solar panels should have been negotiated. Now, I understand why they aren't, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a good point. I think that, and I believe that you were acting in what you thought was the best interest of the city. But I also think that probably some of the method used was one that to expedite the matter and get the thing going before the energy credits ran out. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's okay, and I think it's within the law. But that doesn't mean that Councilor Elliott doesn't have a valid point.
Mr. Manager.
Counselor, if I may, I would never say that Councilor Elliott doesn't have points worth consideration. However, I want to be clear that timing was only one of the issues, or one of the things that we look at in negotiations. Certainly, we weren't going to sign on to anything just to get a solar farm there. What we were looking for is something that would provide benefit to the city. I can tell you, based upon information that we received from outside parties, Department of Energy, or the Executive Office of Energy, the rate that we're receiving, the 0.98, is in line with what is taking place elsewhere. The cost, when you do an analysis of this project versus the water plant, where we did do it differently, because we did it under using the SRF funding, the state revolving fund, at 2% money. When you look at that versus this, in fact, the benefits to the city are comparable. In terms of, in that case, there aren't any net metering credits. There were SRECs, solar renewable energy credits, that went to the low bidder. But we're now responsible for maintaining that. We get the electricity, but we're responsible for maintaining it, and we're responsible for any capital upgrades of that over the next 20 years, which is not the case. And we're also responsible for any liability. In the case of the landfill, it's competitive in terms of value and benefit to the city, but we don't have the liability of putting something on a cap. And there were issues with the cap that we have to be worked out. They still have to be worked out. There were the issues with the methane, and it's a much more complex. All one has to do is look at the landfill and the slope of that landfill to understand the engineering problems, as opposed to the flat piece of land that's in front of the water plant. So, but it's, in terms of dollar amounts, it's comparable. It's comparable to what we've looked at in other places, and it's a much more, or less liability, situation for us than if we had done it ourselves.
I'm not suggesting that it's not it's not
Councilor
a good
Kennedy.
contract and that it,
You will also be recognized by the chair first.
Mr. Mayor, let me just, as a point of order, just so that I'm straight on what you mean. If I get the floor.
If you yielded the floor to the manager, and
no.
I've recognized the
But
manager,
I'm not yielding the floor to the manager.
you had finished-
I was asking the manager a
you had
question.
actually finished your statement, and then the manager was recognized. If
What if
you're
I have-
asking, if you're asking a question through the mayor to the manager, then there is the back and forth. But if you've stopped your questioning and you've finished your statement, and then the manager's been recognized, you must then be recognized again by the
Well,
chair.
Right, but I did ask a question. And so I was expecting to be able to come back. I think that's what Councilor Elliott was.
I don't think you
was,
formed it in the form of question, but any further discussion under communications? Councilor Elliott.
Mr. Manager, what is the rate that the city gets currently per kilowatt hour? What do we pay?
Devon, do you have, it varies by contract. From National Grid or from our contracts?
What do we pay per kilowatt hour, right? You say we're going to make savings, so I just want to know what we're paying now and then what we're going to save.
Do you happen to know that, Mike?
Around 7.076 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's from interest.
Point.
We bid our electricity separately.
We're
But
at,
does that include the
we're at
transmission?
7 cents, and then
That
we're
does
going
not-
to,
that-
we're
that
going to
does
pay
not-
almost 10 cents?
Excuse me, just for clarification.
When we bid the electricity, all we're able to bid is for the consumable product, the electricity. The transmission is set by N-Grid, and we have to pay that, which is roughly 7 cents also. So combined, you're near the 14 cents. But we don't pay purely for electricity, which is what I thought you were asking, that
Okay.
price. And just a clarification, if I may. When we first bid the school project, we did go to DEOR. We only identified the 5 sites that the Amoresco product had said had roofs that were new enough to make physical sense. But if you notice, the letter did say there was a 6th site, even though we didn't identify it. That was a landfill. At the time, we didn't know if we could get the third party to agree to let us there, and we didn't want to ask about something we weren't sure we were going to go with. The 4 schools in the Lowell Memorial Auditorium, we received a $1.4 million grant from the state for doing this. That's why we have an offset, and that cost was lower, that we would not have gotten without the assistance from Amoresco at the time.
Why wouldn't you put the solar project in the original bid?
What do you
Because
mean?
I read that. I read there were 6 sites and there's only 5 listed. Why would you not put that
Because
in
at
the
the time, we
original
didn't
bid?
have the right to go forward, and we were ready to go forward with the grant application for those 5 schools. We couldn't include something we couldn't go forward with for a grant application.
Exactly my point. So you bid something that you didn't have approval or authority to go ahead with. So how could you issue an addendum, put something
The
up?
response from DOER said we didn't need a waiver to do it. It was part of the original ESCO Chapter 25A language.
And this project was not in that original bid document. That's exactly my
Well,
point.
you're stating, I can't debate you. The schools and the actual buildings were not the only things that were done. We certainly did wastewater, variable speed drives and things like that. So we tried to just put the names of the buildings in there, so our bidders, when we first went out in '08, knew what we were looking for in totality. We excluded our enterprise accounts at that time, which were water, wastewater, and at that time it was Songus Arena.
Mr. Bond, I'm not debating you, but you're making a statement and I don't agree with it. You're saying you didn't include the project in the original bid.
No, I said
For
we didn't
whatever-
include that language of the landfill in that letter because we weren't going for grants for that at the time.
DOER did not give you approval, they did not give you the waiver for the landfill because it was not in the original bid specification, the original RFQ.
They
That
did, they
addendum-
wrote in their response, because I certainly vetted this out with everyone as much as I could, and I'm not a lawyer or a total expert in everything, but they said we did not need a waiver because it was already included in the way the law was written.
Well, I'll find a letter that it's not even a letter. It's, unless you have another letter, it was just a
letter to
one-paragraph
Phil-
email that says,
Response.
we will not allow for the waiver. So, do I have a
They would not
different
require.
letter?
Did not require
Did
a
not
waiver.
require the waiver.
Because we thought we might need a waiver.
Okay, this thing's been talked about. This thing should have been out to bid. You know, I did speak to the Inspector General's office, Mr. Manager, and the individual I spoke to, Mr. Cohen, specifically said that the law is clear that you need a waiver, that you need a waiver to do this. And, you know, the solicitor signed the contract as well as the auditor. And if the law is clear, I don't understand why both of you signed it, because there's no authority to do it.
Any further discussion? Councilor Martin.
Just briefly, the email's pretty clear. It says, after reviewing your request, the Department of Energy does not find any need for a waiver. I mean, there it is. I mean, if there are conflicting interpretations between different state agencies, that wouldn't be the first time. But, at least this is pretty clear to me that we're authorized to proceed with this, and everybody was excited about it the whole way through, including up to the announcement that this is going to happen. There were federal credits here, state credits. Congresswoman Tsongas was at the opening, Representative Murphy, everybody taking credit for what is, at bottom, a very good project for the city.
Any further discussion on the communications? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file by Councilor Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Being after 7 o'clock, we'll move to the general public hearings portion of the agenda. First is the order of taking and acceptance of Canal Street. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. In City Council, order of taking and acceptance of Canal Street to take by eminent domain and fee certain parcels of land in the city of Lowell for municipal purposes, to wit, the layout and acceptance of Canal Street and other municipal purposes associated therewith. At this point, we'd open it up for a public hearing for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? In favor, seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. We'd open it up for those wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition? In opposition, seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the council?
Move approval.
Move for approval by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Laurie. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 280 entitled Wetlands. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Noon, seconded by Councilor Mercia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. In City Council ordinance, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts, Chapter 280 entitled Wetlands by clarifying language and grammatical errors, as well as amending various sections. At this point, we'd open it up for a public hearing for those wishing to speak in favor. If you please state your name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Hamblett. I live at 495 Vernon Avenue, and I'm the co-chair of the Pawtucketville Citizens Council. Tonight, we are speaking in favor of the amendments to the Lowell Wetlands Ordinances. Last January, the Pawtucketville Citizens Council recommended to the Conservation Commission that a butter notification for cases coming before the Commission be extended from 100 to 300 feet. Pawtucketville is very sensitive to issues that may impact flooding, and the notification of abutters was needed to be extended to include more neighbors that might be affected by a project. The Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals include a 300-foot abutter notification, so this amendment brings conservation in line with those boards. The second ordinance amendment removes a monetary limit imposed on the use of independent professionals in order to make good, clear decisions about whether wetlands regulations apply. Good, clear information is needed. In the case of a large, multi-acre, multi-million-dollar project, the existing limitation of $2,500 is a drop in the bucket. Increasing the commissioner's ability to get sound, objective information improves the decisions they make. This ordinance removes, the change to this ordinance removes that obstacle to getting good, objective information. The Pawtucketville Citizens Council relies on the decision-making of the Lowell Conservation Commission to help protect our resource areas, our neighbors' property, and ultimately, through better flood control, even their personal safety. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the commissioners for their service. Theirs is no easy task, and they do it with a wealth of experience and expertise, and on a strictly volunteer basis. The chair and the vice chair of the commission alone have more than 50 years' experience, and the commission is made up of highly qualified engineers, wetland scientists, an environmental attorney, and science educators. Again, thank you to the Conservation Commission. And tonight we are asking that you vote in favor of the amendments to the wetlands ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Clerk, Mr. Manager, members of the City Council. My name is Chris Zacher. I'm the chairman of the Conservation Commission. I'd like to recognize a couple of people, mainly the staff of the Conservation Commission, Aaron Kloss and Craig Thomas, and even Sarah Brown, who contributed this. This is coming before you after perhaps 2 years of consideration, deliberation, and rewrites by the Conservation Commission. I'm joined by a fellow commissioner, Louisa Varnum, who also extensively participated in the rewrite. It looks to you like a fairly comprehensive rewrite when in fact there's really only 2 significant changes. The rest of it are just, it's to clarify it and to bring it into modern language, more plain English as we say, and remove some of the legalese from the way Chapter 280 or Section 280 is written. The 2 main changes, as John Hamblett outlined for you, one is to bring the abutter notification in line with what other city boards are doing, and that's the 300-foot rule. We had actually discussed something even more comprehensive about that, and this was, we had gone from 150 feet, which is still the law under the Wetlands Protection Act. This just increases to 300 feet under the city ordinance aspect of the law. So we still have a two-way notification, but still, because the wetland ordinance would, hopefully, if you approve this tonight, require a more comprehensive or a more extended notification process, will increase it from 150 feet to 300 feet. It makes sense considering that, you know, there's folks in Pawtucketville, Centerville, who are along in Highlands, in South Lowell, who are along stream beds, river beds, and whatnot, and they could be affected a half a mile away. So the 300 feet is somewhat of a compromise. We can't notify whole neighborhoods. That would be prohibitively expensive, but that's what the publication in the newspaper, so if anyone else is otherwise interested, they will be able to attend the hearing as they feel it impacts them. But this is just direct certified mail notice. The other significant change was a response to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G. The other boards in the city zoning planning all have a consultant fee process. They all have a peer review process. The Conservation Commission, by our rules and regulations, which did not need your approval, we have adopted this peer review process to bring help to us as commissioners, experts, especially when we're dealing with very complicated issues with respect to new changes to the DEP stormwater management policies and other complex issues that go beyond the scope of what some of our commissioners have. And by case law also, if an applicant, for instance, appearing before us has an expert and we dispute that expert's opinion, we better have an expert to say so. We better have an expert backing up our dispute, or else if it ends up in front of the DEP on appeal, the city will lose its position. The Conservation Commission will lose its position because we have nothing to counter the applicant's expert. We already had the process for a peer reviewer, for a consultant to assist the Conservation Commission. The only problem was we were limited to $2,500 per project. And to get an expert consultant to even give you a quote these days for that amount of money is somewhat laughable. This brings into line, we're requesting that the limit be increased to $50,000 per project. That allows for multiple experts in the case of some of the more complex projects where we have multiple jurisdictional issues. There may be floodplain issues, there may be bordering vegetative wetland issues, there may be stormwater management issues. The Conservation Commission, riverfront issues. The Conservation Commission generally has 7 very different jurisdictional triggers that trigger our action with respect to a project. And the experts that we rely on giving us advice to those projects are not the same people. They don't have the same certifications. Some of them may have certifications that cross 1 or 2 of those boundaries, but for the most part they don't. They're environmental scientists, they're water quality engineers, they went to school for different reasons and they have different expertise, and they're only allowed to offer their opinions inside their own expertise. So in some projects, we may need multiple experts, and with the $2,500 limit, it wasn't a realistic assistance to us. So we're requesting on the first case an increase in the notification up to 300 feet to abutters, and in the second instance, an increase from the $2,500 limit up to the $50,000 limit, which would be more realistic and more practical. I hope the council considers that and approves the changes that we've requested. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? In favor? In favor, seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Councilor Martin?
Yes, I'd like to move for approval on this, but I did see with Chris Zakra, the chairman, Louisa Varnum. I served on the Conservation Commission until 1999. I don't remember exactly how long I was there, but it was at least 7 or 8 years, and Louisa Varnum was there long before that. And so her and Mr. Zakra have been there since 1999, many years. And others have served for longer periods of time too. I think the issues they face are complex. They do a good job. I think I ran for council because their meetings go later into the night than ours do, if that's easy enough to believe, but it's true in many cases. So I accept their judgment on this. I think these were under consideration for a long time. It's going to give them tools they need to do the job, and I think we should thank them for their service, thank the other commissioners, but I think this is a good piece of work and happy to support it.
Thank you. As I understand it, there may actually be one more language change, and I recognize the city solicitor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, when we were going through a final review of the ordinance, it was recommended by the law department that we eliminate the language up to a maximum of $50,000. And while the $50,000 is certainly much more reasonable and in fact is in line with what we'd expect these types of costs to amount to on occasion, depending on the size of the project, we don't want to be in a situation where the city would incur any costs at all. So by eliminating it, the applicant would be responsible for whatever those costs are with no specific cap on that. It was deleted from one version, but apparently the wrong draft was passed forward. So we would ask that on that section of the language, again, up to the maximum of $50,000, that amendment be approved by the council.
Councilman Donza.
That's a good segue. I actually had a question about that, so I'll second Council Martin's motion to accept this and move to amend as the solicitor suggested, which is the Section 4 amendment. And so it's about that maximum amount. So I guess we'll delete everything after applications, which has the maximum of $50,000 included there. And that actually makes it now consistent with the red line version, which did not have that language. Very
Motion
good.
by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilman Donza. On the motion, Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, that was my question, was on the 50,000, so I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor
And
Mercia.
that actually was my question as well, but I want to take this opportunity to thank Chris Zachara and Louisa Vanham for the tremendous job that they do. Occasionally I do tune in, and it's all a foreign language to me, but you're very, very bright, and I'm very impressed, and I wanted to publicly thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the ordinance? Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
On the ordinance as amended.
Right.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy. Yes. Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilman Donza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have the ordinance to create the position of business manager, establishing a salary between $47,500 and $55,000, and delete the position of parking administrator and salary in the parking department. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilman Donson, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed or voted reading by title in City Council ordinance. An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, City of Lowell, Massachusetts, Chapter 280, and an ordinance deleting one position of parking administrator and the salary in the parking department, and creating one new full-time position of business manager, and establishing the salary for the position of business manager in the parking department. At this time, I'd open up for a public hearing for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Open it up for those wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the council? Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few comments, and I'd like to go through you to the city manager. And Mr. Manager, when we say that in the paper that we reviewed, the communication we have, it says that we are saving $40,000, a net savings. To me, we're eliminating a position of $49,000 and creating another position. The only way that I see we're saving $40,000 is because the new budget started July 1st and that person retired. So actually, you know, it's misleading to me, and I didn't like that, but
Okay.
be that as it may. And my other comment is, to me, 40 hours is the work week. I don't know how everything turns to be 35. When you look at 35 hours, that's 260 hours a year, which could be 32 and a half less days a year. So to me, we're being shortchanged, but yet saying it's a full-time position. 40 hours to me, 37 and a half maybe, but 35, in about 5 years, we'll be saying, gee, 30 hours is a full-time job. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's me, I don't know. I'm showing my age again, I guess.
Mr. Manager.
Well, I think, Council, let me address each one of those issues. Let me start with the latter one, the 35. That's the ordinance definition of a full-time employee. That doesn't mean we necessarily work just 35 hours, but that's the ordinance definition. Some union contracts say 40, some union contracts say 37 and a half, some union contracts say 35, and the ordinance employees are 35. It basically means you come in at 9, you leave at 5, you've got an hour for lunch. Most people come in at 8, they leave at 6, and they eat at their desk. But that's the 35. The $40,000 is that what we're doing is we're merging responsibilities that are currently with the contractor with this position. So right now we're paying for a position, the supervisor position, and we are replacing that with the administrator position. But that administrative position will also be doing functions that are now billed to us by the vendor, and that will no longer be the case. And that's where we see the $40,000 saves. It'll be on the vendor side, not on the salary side. But
You know what I
certainly we
mean?
didn't want to.
Sure.
Right. Those are good questions.
All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Excuse me, we need a motion, actually.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Council Noon, seconded by Council Mendoza. Roll call, please.
Council Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Council Nguyen.
Yes.
Council Elliott.
Yes.
Council Kennedy.
Yes.
Council Leahy.
Yes.
Council Laurie.
Yes.
Council Martin.
Yes.
Council Mendoza.
Yes.
It's 9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 272 regarding annual sewer use charge. Motion to waive the full reading by Council Mendoza, seconded by Council Martin. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed or voted, reading by title. In City Council ordinance. An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts, with respect to Chapter 272, Article 6, Section 272 through 87, entitled Annual Sewer Use Charge. Before we begin the public hearing, the manager has a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just it's a very short presentation. I think the council certainly is aware of this whole situation. It was the topic of discussion. Councilman Donzer filed a motion last year that we responded to that dealt with this issue regarding the fund balance of our enterprise and how we were going to manage that over the years in a way that had the least impact. And it was a topic of discussion when the budget was discussed and approved back in June. And we included within that budget, within the wastewater enterprise, a half-year increase in the fee of 5%. And so that's all been talked about. But just to refresh everyone's memory, particularly the public, to give them some understanding of why this is. Let me see if I can get this thing to work. Why this is the case. Maybe I won't be able to do that. You know. Well, bear with me for one more second here.
Change of the battery.
Can you do it by the, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Mr. Marchand will use his index finger. We want to go through the background, the justification for the increase and the comparison to other communities, and then looking forward to the future. In terms of the background, as many of you know, those who have been on the council, and obviously all of you know that over the last decade, the city has invested over $100 million in infrastructure improvements at the wastewater plant and in its system, mostly as a response to an administrative order from the Environmental Protection Agency to mitigate the CSOs. This administrative order came from the federal government to ensure clean drinking water throughout the nation. So much of this cost can be attributed to the administrative order of the Environmental Protection Agency. The old plan that we've used in the past deferred rate increases as long as possible. And that's certainly understandable, but that has its drawbacks, because then you get wild swings or wild spikes in your rates. The 2008 City Council, when we had this discussion, preferred, they asked that we try to look at things on a biannual basis. But that was the 2008, and of course we encountered some financial difficulties in 2008, 2009, 2010, and so we've held back on that. But I think we've seen that there has been actions taken by wastewater over the last several years to make the enterprise, to quote Councilor Mendonça, to make the enterprise more enterprising in terms of the revenue that we bring in and cost reductions. The current council, again, as a result of a motion made, requested that there be small incremental increases to achieve soft landing, if you will, so that we don't have those spikes. So the budget that should say FY13, by the way, FY13 budget was approved based on a 5% rate increase to be effective on January 1st. We didn't put it in place in July. We put it in place on January 1st. For the average homeowner, it's going to mean an increase of about $16 on an annual basis. For this fiscal year, it will be $8 for the average homeowner. I should note that one of the questions that's often put to us is, the nonprofits, specifically the community college, the university is a very large user, and the hospital. Now, they do not pay taxes, as we all know, but they do use water and they do use wastewater, and they do pay those bills. It's important that we fully load all of these and make sure that the bills go out in a way that none of this comes back on the taxpayer. So they will be paying these in addition. The last increase that we did in wastewater was in 2008. More recent forecasts have improved considerably since then, though, as you can see. Originally, in 2009, 2013, we were projecting that over this period of time, we'd be looking at 11, 26, 11, 11, and 0 for increases. In 2009, we changed that to 11, 0, 43, 0, 24, 0, 0. And right now, and in the budget that you just received last June, in the 2013 budget, we were saying 5% this year, 4% next year, 4% the year after that, 4% the year after that, and 3% the year after that. We're now saying, based upon the information we have on revenue and expenditures, that we're looking at a 5-2-2-2-2, which just, the rough numbers there of 5% being $32, you can see that the 2%, $16, you can see that the 2% is going to be just a few dollars per household. That's soft landing that we were hoping to achieve. And, that's what we're looking at right now. But in fact, as we continue to be enterprising, as we continue to try to find ways to minimize costs and maximize outside revenues coming in, whether it be septic haulers, the money paid by the other communities, better collections, all of those things, and reducing costs, we're hoping to actually get that down even more over the course of the next year or so. I think we're heading to the end here. In terms of justification, this isn't the best. This is our new fad. We use these scattergrams. Henry, if you could help me out here and point to the red up in the far left-hand corner. Basically what these are all of the municipalities of the Commonwealth. The left-hand grid gives the population, so the lower the grid, are the smaller communities. The highest goes up to 180,000 people, so obviously we don't include the city of Boston in there. And then going on the lower grid is the incremental cost of the average sewer bill. So what that shows you is everyone to the right of us, whether large or small, Henry, if you could point one more time, everyone towards Henry pays more for their sewer bill than the city of Lowell, the average sewer bill. So we are on the very, very low. The only ones that are lower than us are very small. There's probably a dozen or so communities, maybe a little bit more, that are below us in population that charge less for the average sewer bill. I don't have those specific, but we can get you that list if you're interested. Most of them are probably, I would guess, out in the western part of the Commonwealth. Go to the next slide. Without the rate increase, that we built into the budget, the rate increase happening. Without that, the DOR is likely to require us to add that onto our tax levy. And of course, our goal here was to make sure that the homeowners aren't affected by the sewer rates, that we're putting it on the university and the hospitals and those large users. And that we're also obviously making a goal. We've had a conscious goal this year to come forward with a zero tax increase this year. So we certainly want to avoid that. In terms of the future, again, we're only looking at small rate increases to absorb the latest $35 million loan order that was done. If we do a new loan order, and it is likely we will need a new loan order because the Environmental Protection Agency is going to be continuing to require us to make these investments and deal with the CSO issue. We do have a number of other issues we're dealing with. The plant, for the most part, is done, but we have some other issues with the CSOs. That will require future rate increases, but we think we can plan that out, again, in a way that mitigates that. And as I said at the very last point, those would be mitigated by additional revenues and/or cost savings. So Mr. Young is here, the Executive Director of the Wastewater Utility. He can describe to you the various improvements that have been made over the last number of years, if you're so interested. And I'll give you some sense of what we're looking at in the future, if that's in your mind as well.
At this point, I'd open it up for a public hearing for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Open it up for those wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition? In opposition. Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we delay action on this for 1 week. And the reason for that is I'd like to get more information from the administration. I'm not so concerned about what other communities are paying, but what I would like to do is measure what I'd like to do is measure what the operating budget and the debt service is compared to the revenues. To see just because to me the sewer charge should just be paying for the sewer system and nothing else. And so maybe that's the case, but you did not provide a lot of information. There's a little more information on this PowerPoint presentation, but there wasn't much in the packet. And I also understand that we're not intending to do this until the first of the year anyways. And so what I'd ask for is a 1-week delay in order that we can get additional information. If I'm going to vote for a sewer charge increase, then I'd at least like to know how all the numbers line up and why we need it.
Second.
Motion to delay by Councilor Kennedy, second by Councilor Mercia. Any discussion? Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager, and this is only because you mentioned it, and you said that hospitals and universities pay the water bill. So I'm asking if you ever checked into putting a meter on the hydrant at St. Joseph's Hospital. Is there a meter there now?
The arrangement that the city has when people open a hydrant is they pay a flat amount for the use of that hydrant, and they did pay that to the water utility. Yes.
What is the fee? Do you?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that.
They are paying something?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
It's not the university, it's the contractor that's paying it.
Right.
Councilor Leahy?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. I did check into that, and it's in the hundreds of dollars, so it's not they're paying for the water that they do use.
I want my just desserts here, that's all.
Further discussion? Councilor Elliott and then Councilor Mendoza.
Thank you. I'll support the motion for delay. The 35 million, actually, when we come back, can you please provide us the debt schedule for the loan order for $65 million? That was for phase 1 of the CSO project, and my understanding is that back in, I believe it was 2005, that we, under Manager Cox, that rates were raised sufficient enough to cover that. So I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say that now we're paying, or we continue to pay for those improvements. But maybe the debt schedule will show that, and it would have been helpful to have it when we're asking to support this. But my other question is wastewater revenues. They were on the rise, particularly from septic hauling. Has that, and there was has that stopped? Has there been an interruption in the ability to process hauled waste at the wastewater treatment plant?
Mr. Young?
I mean, my understanding there was a major customer and they're not doing it anymore.
There's not an inability for us to accept hauled waste, Councilor, but we had one large customer, Public Service of New Hampshire. Their Bow coal-fired treatment plant, power plant is not generating power because of the price of natural gas is so low compared to coal. So they are actually out of service right now. They're bringing in some of their waste, but it's not like they were bringing last year. Once they power up, they are anticipated to power up during the wintertime when the electricity is needed for heat. So we are anticipating an increase in revenues from that source at that time.
What was the amount of revenue that was generated from that particular?
I don't know, I don't recall particularly the exact amount, Councilor. I could get that for you if you want it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin. Excuse me, Councilman Johnson, then Councilor Martin.
Yes, I know I've been on this issue quite a bit in the past year, and I've been following it in the sense that what concerned me is that we're running an operating deficit in this account. And fortunately, we had some reserves, but we're quickly going to run out of them at the current rate. And as we discussed at budget time, I'd rather have single-digit increases now and as we need them in the future, rather than wait for a double-digit or more increase. We certainly would never want to have a 43% increase all in 1 year. That would be a huge spike. So I think we need to manage this, and we need to, I wouldn't mind waiting a week to get those projections again to see where we're at and where we're going. And of course, some of it is projections, so we can't always rely on this outside revenue, as the example that was just pointed out by Mr. Young, is that yes, we're getting that income, but at any time, those people bringing that hauled waste could stop. At the same time, there could be additional vendors bringing hauled waste in. So it's going to be harder to project than the regular usage of our residents. We also want to make sure that the users of the water are the ones paying for it. And we don't want to wind up in a situation where we put it on a tax levy and it's the residents or the property owners that are paying for it, especially when there are nonprofits that may not be contributing in that way, but are contributing when they use the water. And I just want it to be fair to our residents. Everyone's paying the same rate. Everyone's taken part of the burden of providing this service, including ultimately the communities that also send sewage to our plant, that it be a fair amount compared to what our residents would have to pay. So this small increase I would support as, again, a way to get that soft landing and make sure we don't have huge increases in the future.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't object to the delay. I think a lot of the information that's been asked for tonight was in the budget, actually, but maybe not all of it. And what I don't remember being in the budget, frankly, and it got me a little nervous, Mr. Manager, about what the EPA is going to require in the future. You know, I remember as mayor meeting with EPA, you know, with a $300 million plan, but, you know, and that was 5 years ago, so 300 million now is probably that much more. When for half that money, you solve maybe 80% of the problem. And, you know, so I think we need to push back a little bit on EPA. We did then, and of course, the response we get is, well, your rates are too low. That's why you can't afford it. You need to raise your rates. And, you know, my response back was, aren't you guys the Republicans? But, you know, that fell on deaf ears too, and I don't mean to go all partisan on this, but that's the reality you're dealing with, and I don't expect the answer would be much different now from a different administration. And so there is pressure from the EPA to raise rates to pay for this work. And I have a pretty good understanding of what's come to now, but I want to know what we're likely to face in the future. I don't expect, given the projections, that we're looking at, you know, major significant expenditures if we're only anticipating 2% revenue increase needs over the next 5 years. But to me, that's something that would be worth at least having some working knowledge of as to what's going to be expected of the city under the existing consent decree. And, you know, because there is a lot of work in the pipeline still that I think the EPA's been satisfied with. The city's made a good faith effort, and we've been able to address some of our flooding problems as we've addressed the CSO issue too. So I think that would be something that'd be worthwhile for everybody to have a good understanding of.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on Councilor Martin's comments concerning the EPA and the cost down the road, and looking at your projections of 2%, and I know down the road, we had talked about earlier, was a pump station, and it's going to be costly, but after listening to Councilor Martin's comments, those costs could rise because of the EPA, and I believe FEMA is also going to play a large role in that. So, you know, I agree with maybe a week. I don't know if we can get an estimate on those costs down the road, and they're down the road. But, you know, looking at the 222, I don't know how, you know, because you're dealing with another agency, two agencies that I can think of, EPA and FEMA, and then the cost, which will be borne by the city. Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, to the council, I had hoped that many of these questions had been answered when we did the budget back in June, where there was certainly an understanding at the time, or seemed to be an understanding at the time, that we would be making this rate increase. And I'm happy to add additional information, whatever information the council requires, happy to do. However, the individual who crunches these numbers and does this work for me is Mr. Moses, and he is away for 2 weeks. So he was not returning until the Friday before the 30th, or the Monday, the 29th. So it's going to be difficult for me to pull all that together for you. I proposed to the mayor doing it on the 30th, but in order to get it out into your packets ahead of that time, that's going to be problematic. I will do my best, but I would ask that it be put off to the 30th and possibly to the first week of November.
To the maker of the motion.
That's all right with me. The questions that I have should only take a week and probably wouldn't require Mr. Moses. Probably it would just require a short amount of time speaking to you. And but the 30th is okay too. I mean, we have plenty of time on this. It's not as if there's a rush. So
the only issue that we really have is we need to get do the billing. But that gives us, we should have enough time to get that done. And, you know, Councilor, if perhaps you and I can speak offline. We'll get that. You can give me your questions, and I will say that I don't know. I'll get back to you, and I'll put something together that then I can get back to the council. based on your questions, or if any other councilors have questions that they would like included in the information, that would be helpful so that we make sure that everybody's information is in there.
When does Mr. Moses get back?
He gets back the 29th.
Okay.
So, and Councilor Elliott, if I wasn't quite sure, we can get you where we stand on that $65 million. That bond issue, I believe, was 2004 or thereabouts. I'm not entirely clear on what you're looking for. If you could get back to me either by email or a phone call, I'll be happy to pull that together as well.
Okay, I can clarify. I mean, you referenced that the work that was done on that CSO is contributing to this
Correct.
increase. So I just would like to see the debt schedule when that went online. And hopefully it wasn't rolled in with other loan orders, but I guess Mr. Moses would be able to tell us. I just want to know what the effect that is, and because I was pretty sure that rates were increased at that time to address that specific loan order.
Okay, we'll check on that.
So if that's acceptable to Councilor Kennedy, motion to delay until the 30th of October. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. See, out and about in the public says this: oh my gosh, they didn't raise our taxes, but now they're raising every sewer, the fees, the fines, the this, the that. And I can understand their thoughts like that. But then when you sit here behind these desks and you realize that we have a consent decree that we have to follow, and as Councilor Martin said, years ago, we learned that if we had all the money from beginning to end, at that time would have been something like $332 million to do that. Now, all these years later, it's probably significantly higher. But all in all, it's the federal government that is saying to us as a city, we want you to do this, that, and make sure you do it. And it's an unfunded mandate by telling us all the things that we have to do, and we have a certain amount of time to do each step in increments. And although it seems like we don't want to raise fees or bills for people in this respect, gee, you almost have to do that. And so here we are sitting in a position where we wish we weren't again, because we have issues. We're trying to get ahead of things before they become major problems. We did learn that in June, improved for a $35 million vote was just the beginning of a 20-year capital improvement plan. That the plant was built 27 years ago and has not received any improvements of any magnitude then. Plus, we have to separate the CSO. There's a lot that's entailed in this, and so to just simply think that we're just sitting here just to raise rates because we didn't raise taxes, you hear it all, and I'm just trying to clarify that we don't want to sit here and do that, but there's things that have to be done, and we're mandated to do it. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Returning to the city manager's portion of the agenda, we have a communication from the city manager to request approval for out-of-state travel for the Lowell Police Department. What's the wish of the council? Move for approval by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Martin. Any discussion? Roll call,
Yes,
please.
I have a discussion.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, and I know that, the chief was here, but I just question, how do you stay one night and have no hotel charge? I'm sure they're not sleeping in their car, but the traveling date is, let's say, October 22nd through to the 23rd. To me, that's a night, and yet they're not staying anywhere? Is it?
There's no cost for the city. This is being picked up by the people that are putting on the problem-oriented policing conference. They've asked Deputy Ryan to come down and speak, and they'll be providing him the hotel space. They will not charge him because he should be charging them maybe, and there won't be any airline cost or per diem. So the only would be is some tolls probably, as he.
Oh, I just wish they
Probably
would
no
have.
even tolls. So-
Mr. Manager, I wish they would have just included a sentence that said
I
no
agree.
cost to the city, because I couldn't figure out how they can stay overnight, and I'm glad he's not sleeping in the car. Thank you.
That wouldn't be good.
Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nguyen.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Next, we have a communication from the city manager to request approval of out-of-state travel for the wastewater department. What's the
Move
wish
to
of the-
approve.
Move for approval by Council Laurie, seconded by Council Mendoza. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nguyen.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Next, we have an order for a 60-day trial at 158 Concord Street. Motion to waive the full reading by Council Mendoza, seconded by Council Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title in City Council order. Pursuant to Chapter 266 of the Code of Ordinances, City of Lowell, Massachusetts, concerning Section 266-6, entitled Temporary Experimental Regulations, temporary traffic regulations are implemented for a period of 60 days. What's the wish of the council? Move for approval by Council Laurie, seconded by Council Kennedy. Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nguyen.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Next, we have a vote to accept proposal of Jose and Maria Perigil for $23,000 and convey 84 West 6th Street under 30B. Motion to waive the full reading by Council Noon, seconded by Council Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. In City Council vote, authorizing the city manager to accept the proposal of Jose and Maria Perigil in the amount of $23,000 to purchase property located at 84 West 6th Street, Lowell, and to execute all documents necessary for the transfer of the property.
Move to approve.
Move for approval by Council Laurie, second by Council Mercia. Any discussion?
Yes.
Roll call. Council Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate what we see in front of us that the public doesn't know, that this is an abutter. That was the only proposal from one of the abutters, and it was highly advantageous to the point where these are wonderful people because they take pride in their neighborhood. They have significantly spent time and resources to put time to clean that property and take care of it while the tax title and foreclosure process was pending. So they're well deserving of this land. It's a vacant piece of land. They're going to use it for open space or landscaping and parking use. So that's a very dense neighborhood, and it would be sufficiently used for the right purpose. And I want to say that I wholeheartedly approve of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Laurie.
Just to follow up on what Councilor Mercy is saying, you know, things like this are really good for the city. I get a couple of motions down the line which, you know, deals with things like this, but, you know, that they pick up the property, and as Councilor Mercia says, it would be much better for the neighborhood. They'll beautify it, and it's good for the city.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nguyen.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have subcommittee reports. Any reports? Seeing none, moving on to general petitions. We have one claim for property damage and one claim for personal injury damage.
Refer to the Law Department for report and recommendation.
Motion by Council Kennedy, seconded by Council Laurie. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have motions. Motion by Council Laurie, request the city manager form a problem property task force similar to the one used in Boston. Seconded by Council Kennedy. Council Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, Chief, I got some information. About an hour ago, we saw the room shaking a little bit and everyone looking around. I guess it happened around the city, too. I think we had a little tremor in the city. I know Lyle tweets and Twitters over there. I don't know if he's heard anything from other people. Oh, that's what it was.
I thought it was me. I really thought I was going out. I thought I was dying.
I'd like to make an alternative motion to move
Didn't
the
even notice it.
chandelier.
I did. I felt it. I said, oh, no.
So this is related to the motion and that there may be more problem properties, or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The insurance companies. Well, on this particular motion on the problem properties, it stemmed from actually, a couple of weeks ago, I put a motion on 603 Chelm Street. And as you go around the city, we do have a lot of, have issues with some properties. And there was a story I saw in the Boston paper, and it was on problem properties and how they deal with them. And I called Adam Bakey, and we were talking, the manager was on vacation. And I know the police chief does meet, and inspectional services and the fire department. But the problem is, what happens if we get a new manager, a new fire chief, a new police chief, and they don't want to meet? I'd like to institutionalize it. Down in Boston, if you get 4 calls on a piece of property, and that's noise, police reports, inspectional services, you go on a problem property list, and Boston says the majority of their calls comes from this list. And I'd like the city to really consider, and the manager, putting a group together, at least the fire department, police department, inspectional services, and probably someone of his choice, and set a group. And the benefits would be, there would be set guidelines, set penalties, and set goals for the group. In Boston, they use 4 calls. I don't know if we have to use 4 calls. But we've had situations in the neighborhoods, many times with the police, they get calls to the same homes, noise, drugs, and things like that. Inspectional services becomes involved. So I'd like to see the manager form a task force, more so than we do now, very much more formal. I wouldn't even mind seeing a task force with a letterhead, maybe on your 3rd violation. That letter goes out to the property owners, and we have and what the violations would be, what the penalties would finally be, and what the goals would be down the line. Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
Councilor, as you point out, we do have a team that works together now. It's the manager's neighborhood impact team that does a number of, but I think I see where you're heading with this, and perhaps we could formalize that more with some of the guidelines that you're talking about, so we'll be happy to do some work on that.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We also have a receivership program with the courts, do we not?
That's correct.
Is that similar to what Councilor?
I think it's an action that could be taken by the team. It's an action right now that's taken by inspectional services, but it could be linked in with the team approach.
Because that wouldn't eliminate that receivership
Not at all.
program.
Not at all.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm glad Councilor Mercia brought that up. One of the things I'd like to see this task force do is work more with the states. For example, I was talking to Registry of Deeds, Richard Howe, who does a great job. They get a notice of properties that are going to be taken over before the city. So maybe the task force could work with agencies like the Registry of Deeds and be more proactive. We get the list and we know there may be a problem in these areas. And any other state agency you can think of, but at least Registry of Deeds, if you work with them, you get their list, you'd be a little bit more, we could be more proactive on these properties.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Lowry, request the city manager have proper department draft an off-campus student housing ordinance. Second by Councilor Mendonça. Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has stemmed from a lot of the calls we've gotten in Pawtuckaville over at least my time on the council, most of it to do with noise, student housing. I'd like to see the manager and have a proper department head draft up the student housing ordinance. And I think we could probably do it in just two sections of the city, one in Pawtuckaville and one in the Acre. Now is the university. We've always had the South Campus, but now we have University Crossing. So I think we're going to see more students moving into the section of the area. I'm already hearing complaints down on Moody Street, the students taking up the on-street parking along St. James and Moody Street. But on the off-campus student housing, I think there's two issues we can look at. One, the city can work with the owners of the property. If we're having calls, again, if we're getting 2 or 3 calls to the same places for loud parties and things like that, we can turn it over to the task force. The other thing we could do with the university is deal with the students through the university itself. They have penalties for their students on behavior on and off campus. And I know when the police go to these parties, they look at the student IDs and they take the information. I'm more concerned with the students who rent the properties themselves. And if we could work with the owner of the property and then work with the university, with the students, I think we may be able to solve some of the problems we're facing here in the city. I would like to see this sent on a little farther down. I have a motion on October 30th. We're going to be meeting with the university or with the educational partnership, and maybe we could take this up at that time, the subcommittee with the university, at least on their end with the students. I'm sure the law department could be working on the ordinance prior. Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
Council, the only issue that I think the law department is the one that we're going to have to work through on this, because there are some issues, legal issues, I think we'd have to work on that. But we'll, again, assuming council supported this motion, I'll have the law department do some work, and we may be in touch just to, again, pick your brain and see, make sure we're addressing the questions or the issues that you're trying to address.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed or voted? Next, we have motion by Councilor Laurie. Request the city manager have proper department provide a list of possible sites for outdoor skating this winter. Seconded by Councilor Mercia. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it was last January I filed a motion to bring back what Lowell did for many years, was flood the parks. Unfortunately, we had probably the worst winter for skating, and unless you were rollerblading. But I'd like to, and I know I've talked to the Commissioner, Tom Bellegarde, and we were looking at different sites, and I know he had been looking at some different sites. So being that it's in October, and by the time we get the reports back, I'd like to see a report on the plan for the winter. Are we going to flood several parks? Are we going to do a couple to have a prototype as we go along into the years to come? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager.
Again, Mr. Mayor, to the council, we do have a number of areas that we're looking at. We'd like to see about some pond areas that might work more effectively than flooding. But I'd have to respectfully disagree with you about the fortunately versus unfortunately. I actually thought it was very fortunate that we didn't have any ice last year.
That was your budget.
That's right.
It wasn't good for the kids, it was good for your budget. No, and I agreed. I had talked to Commissioner Bellegarde, and I talked to some of the residents in the Highlands for many years. They skated on Blackbrook. Right. There is a pond behind Shed Park. I don't know if that's suitable for skating, if we could clean it out and get some ice up there. But the other alternative would be to just flood the parks like we did years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott.
I think this is a very good idea. Mr. Manager, do we have any responsibility in maintaining this ice after from safety perspective?
Well, hopefully it wouldn't be really, we'd have some, I'd have to defer to the law department. Obviously, we wouldn't be deep. The shallower the better. There is the issue, though, that it does require regular maintenance. After it gets some wear and tear, and after it gets a snowstorm, it has some impacts, so you have to reflood it. There are issues like that.
I just want to protect the city, that's all. And it's a very good idea, and it's inexpensive, it won't cost anything. But I do know that with the parks, we have to make sure the city's responsible. So if there is if there's an apparatus that's broken or needs to be fixed, and somebody gets hurt there, then it's we're responsible. I mean, maybe it's not the case. I mean, if there's a divot in the ice or something, I just wanted to.
We'll
put
follow
out
up
there.
on that and make sure that, and the other issue in terms of cost, there will be some labor cost that goes into doing it, and some material costs perhaps, but the other costs we just want to be sure we're clear on is any impact it might have on the fields below, particularly as the as the spring approaches. If there's an accumulation of ice that has to melt off, it could damage the fields or limit the use of the fields in the spring. So we just want to put a plan together that does all that.
Thank you.
Madam Solicitor.
Just briefly, and we can, excuse me, get you a short report on this, but generally speaking, something like this would fall under the recreational use statute. And so as long as the city wasn't charging for these, for entrance or fees, and as long as it was actually being used for a recreational purpose, we generally enjoy immunity from suit.
Okay, don't spend the time in a report if that's what the law is. I was just checking.
Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say that. I remember when I brought the motion in back in January, the city solicitor had talked a little bit about what the responsibility was. As far as maintenance, after this story ran, and I thank the Lowell Sun because they did carry the story, and I got at least one, maybe two calls from people who live out of town. And as far as maintenance of the rink goes, what they do is they actually get volunteers, and you might get a couple adults who want to volunteer. A lot of the ice, I used to love to play hockey, gets chopped up during the course of the day, so they just get a shovel and they brush the old ice off, and just maybe the fire department or someone comes in and refloods it. But I did get a couple of calls, and they did, if you only have a couple of locations, work with volunteers that might come forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Mercia.
At one time, when I made the motion some years ago, because my husband was a fanatic for getting these kids on safe ground instead of going off to ponds and probably drowning or whatever, the fire department did flood Shed Park. And as quick as they flooded it, it just, dissolved into the earth. So it was for nothing, but we meant well. Yeah, it was tough.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Laurie. Request the City Council convene a meeting of Education Partnership Subcommittee regarding meeting with University on October 30th, 2012 at 5 p.m. Seconded by Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I talked to the councilors, Councilor Kennedy and Councilor Lowell, who are on the committee, and they'll be available that night. I talked to Emily Burns in Marty's office, so we're all set for October 30th at 5 o'clock here. I'm going to meet with the Chancellor next Monday and talk a little bit about the agenda. I think one of the things we want to talk about is that off-campus student housing, how we can partner with the university, with the landlords, and them with the students. And they're concerned about that too. They're concerned about safe, clean housing for their students. So there's a two-way street there. And the other is maybe what the partnerships we have with the university, especially the economic partnerships with DPD and the university, and what we can expect going forward, and probably some talk about what's going on at the university.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Mercia. Request the city manager provide a report concerning the investigation of Engine 11 and the status of litigation. Seconded by Councilor Mendonça. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought that where this fire started in July, 3 months ago, I thought it was resolved by now, but it is my understanding that the Engine 11 fire is the subject of a pending unresolved dispute regarding the fire's origin and the responsibility for it. I'm not a professional, but I thought if you had something fixed and it was only 2 weeks out of being fixed and it caught fire, I was wondering if it only seems to me that it would have been the fault of the mechanic or whoever did this, but I'm not a fire investigator, and so I just wanted you to know that I'm still waiting. If it's ever resolved, if we could have some information on it, that's all.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you.
Councilor, what I might suggest is that the council may wish to meet in executive session so we can brief you. It's, in any type of issue like this, there's always lots of fingers being pointed in lots of different ways, and but we're making some progress there, and but we'd like to sit down and discuss it with the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott.
Well, we asked for a report, Mr. Manager. Why, why can't we get that information?
Regarding what aspect of it, Councilor?
Regarding the investigation of Engine 11.
We can
I
give
mean,
you that.
similarly to Engine 6. I mean, apparently it blew up and we didn't get a report on that either, or the battery blew up.
Well, we have vehicle issues all the time, and in Engine 6, the battery went on it, and if the council would like reports on every vehicle issue that we have, I'd be happy to. I suppose we can try to do something like that, but the issue
Mr.
with...
Manager, I understand you want to make those statements, but I think it's a little bit more than that, considering there have been some problems. There's been numerous discussions with the procurement and the purchasing of these fire engines. And I don't know why it is so difficult for you to give us information or an updates. We get updates on other things, and then when we ask for something, we either have to go into executive session or we have to ask 2 and 3 weeks. It gets a little bit frustrating. I mean, I think, I think it's kind of a no-brainer that this information, there was a discussion on it, Council Mercer said it, in July. And she has to, if she didn't file a motion, then we wouldn't have even had this discussion again.
Well, again, I'm more than happy to talk about the situation with Engine 11. I think in the best interests of the city, it should be done in executive session. And again, be happy to do that. Again, I'm looking, in my opinion, with the input of the solicitor as well, for the best interests of the city. With regards to the general claim that information is withheld, I think there's, I know that there's been a couple comments tonight about the contracts that we didn't get out with it last week. I'll take responsibility for that, but again, I think that there were reasons for that, and we'll work on that. But I do think that the claim that the administration is withholding information, I know that's a popular thing for some people to say. We are very good about giving information. We're very good about responding to councilors for requests. I think every councilor here has been in touch with me on a regular basis, on weekends, on nights, asking for information, asking for issues to be addressed. Myself and other members of the administration are always quick and ready. You yourself, Councilor, have contacted me on weekends or sent along emails, and I've sent back information to you. We're very quick to get information out. And in this case, I know we're pointing at these contracts that didn't get out last week, and I've explained why. But with regards to Engine 11, it is a matter of litigation. It is not in the best interest of the city to put that out there just yet. And with regards to the, I guess I'll just, and with regards to the procurement, there were no issues with procurement with these. There was some disputed bids, there were things of that sort, but we worked through those. That's always going to happen when one bidder gets the bid and another one doesn't. But again, we'll get that litigation report out as soon as we can in the best interest of the city.
Councilor Mercier.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think I still had the floor.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. I can come back with other questions.
Councilor Mercier.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you to the city manager, when you have enough information, can you just put on the agenda that we're going into executive session for the purpose of discussing this?
We'll do it next week.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Elliott.
Councilor Kennedy was before me, too.
Councilor Kennedy.
I was just gonna ask when we can do the executive session. So as long as we do that, instead of it just being for Engine 11, can we do everything, all of those issues around the, all of the fire apparatus?
Sure, we could talk, I don't know if that's all applicable for executive session, but we can talk about that with,
Well, I mean, as long as we're going, you're the one suggesting that we go into executive session, not me, but as long as we're there talking about one, I just want you to be prepared to talk about all of
Sure.
them, that's all.
sure.
Councilor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor, almost set.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. The last item on the agenda is executive session to conduct contract negotiations with city auditor, non-union personnel. We'd have to decide at this point on whether to reconvene an open session for a vote or to adjourn after the executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that the solicitor did call me on this issue. I don't know what the wish of the body is, but I'd like to just go in open session. We're always hearing about transparency. I don't have a problem with discussing this openly. But that's my opinion. I don't care where we go, but I thought we could say it right here.
We'd need a motion on whether to go into executive session or not.
Well, then I'll make the motion to go into, to stay right here.
Motion by Councilor Mercia to conduct contract negotiations in open session. Second? Seconded by Councilor Elliott. Councilor Martin on the motion.
Yes. Could I just, is the salary an issue? I mean, I know the auditor gets paid on the grid with kind of other senior level. I think at the same level as the solicitor gets paid, as the DPD director gets paid. Is that the case?
The auditor is covered under the same department head ordinance as all of the other department heads within the city. She's at a different place on the grid, but the salary increases are tied to all the other department head increases. And when another department head gets it, when the department heads get an increase, historically the auditor has then gotten an increase. When they haven't gotten an increase, even though there's a contract entitling the auditor to the increase hasn't been awarded. She hasn't taken it.
Does the contract allow for that?
It does. I'm speaking to instances where other union groups and other employees forego raises in years past, and that occurred with the auditor as well.
The reason I ask is because I think that is the kind of the need for the executive session, right? I mean, if we decide we're willing to pay $100,000, for example, but we're going to offer $90,000, it's kind of pointless to have that discussion in public, right? However, if the salary is based on a grid, I think the need for the executive session is much less. I mean, if because the other terms and conditions, I think, are relatively mundane. So if the salary is really not at issue, I don't have any objection to proceeding in the open session.
Councilor Kennedy and then Councilor New.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on what Councilor Martin is saying, in addition to the salary, I guess I don't really understand how we would be able to conduct contract negotiations in any way that's not going to be terribly awkward, either in executive session or in open session, unless the council has first arrived at a consensus over what they would be looking for in the contract. And that, I suppose, would go to salary and go to other items that would be in the contract, including the length of the contract. And I don't know if we aren't going to do that first, before we have anybody else with us, then you get 9 people that could have 9 different opinions. It just doesn't, I don't understand how that works, either in executive session or open session. I mean, I was expecting this evening that we would be meeting in executive session and that it would just be the members of the council and nobody else. And that the members of the council that would then determine what they would be looking for in the contract negotiations. And then there would be another session, or the session could continue with the city auditor there. But I don't know how we proceed. There's 9 members on the city council. I don't know how you can proceed either open or in executive session without first knowing what we're going to ask for, or what we're going to expect. Just if someone can explain that to me in a way that makes sense, then I would appreciate it.
Council Noon, or excuse me, Madam Solicitor, and then Council Noon.
Thank you, Mayor. What has been the past practice in terms of the contract negotiation, whether that be the auditor or the manager, or what has been the past practice on that? Has it been open or has it been in the executive session?
Madam Solicitor.
As far as the past practice, we've always, whether it's on the city side or the school side, we've always conducted these in executive session. But to answer Councilor Kennedy's question, that's how we would do it, exactly as you were saying, that the first step would be that the council would meet and decide what direction they want to go in. Now, in this case, it may be relatively straightforward depending on what the council decides. And I have with me, if we were going to go into executive session, I would give you the documents in executive session, but it's just a term sheet of the summary of the existing contract and the provisions that we already have. But that's generally how they would go. And then from there, the council would decide what it wants to do.
Any further discussion on the motion? Council Leahy.
So just to clarify, the motion is to not go into executive session to start?
Correct.
Okay. Because I think we do need to meet, as Councilor Kennedy said, to see where we want to go and what we want to do. And then I'm open to, once we know where we're going, to come out and do it in open session.
Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
No.
Councilor Noon.
No.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
No.
Councilor Leahy.
No.
Councilor Laurie.
No.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Madonza.
No.
3 yeas, 6 nays.
At this point, then, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session to conduct strategy sessions for negotiations with non-union
So moved.
personnel. So moved by Councilor Noon, seconded by Councilman Mendonça.
Would we
Discussion.
adjourn from executive session?
To adjourn from executive session. Councilor Kennedy?
Who will be present in the executive session?
I imagine all of us.
You just mean the 9?
The City Council, yes.
Okay.
And
Well-
city solicitor would be here as well to hand out terms and... Any further discussion on the motion? No. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
No.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Nope.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
No.
Councilor Madonza.
Yes.
6 yeas, 3 nays.
And again, we'll adjourn from executive session.